The kitchen clock read 11:47 p.m. when I heard Vanessa's BMW crunch up our gravel driveway. I was nursing my third beer at the scarred oak table my mother had left me, pretending to read a popular mechanics magazine while actually counting how many late nights at the office we'd hit this month. 17. In a town where most real estate offices closed by 6. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Vanessa's heels clicked across the hardwood like gunshots as she marched into the kitchen, her perfectly styled blonde hair slightly mussed, her designer blazer wrinkled. She looked like a woman who'd been doing more than reviewing property listings. "Jack." Her voice was ice-cold professional, the tone she used with difficult clients. "We need to talk." I looked up from my magazine, keeping my expression neutral. After 15 years of marriage, I'd learned to read the weather in her green eyes. Tonight, it was a Category 5 hurricane. "Sure thing, honey. How was your evening? Close any big deals with that new client?" She ignored the question and reached into her oversized leather purse, pulling out a manila envelope thick enough to choke a horse. She dropped it on the table with a satisfying thud, right on top of my magazine. "Divorce papers," she announced, like she was telling me dinner was ready. "I've already signed them. All you need to do is sign on the highlighted lines and initial where marked." I stared at the envelope without touching it. "Well, that's efficient of you. When did you find time to visit a lawyer between all those late-night showings?" Her jaw tightened. "Don't be cute, Jack. This marriage has been over for months, and we both know it. I'm just making it official." "Uh-huh." I took a long pull from my beer, watching her over the bottle. "And what exactly are the terms of this generous offer?" Vanessa's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "You get to keep your precious tools and that beat-up truck. I get the house, half your mother's life insurance money, and primary custody of Emma and Tyler." The mention of my kids hit like a punch to the gut, but I kept my face blank. "That's interesting. And what if I don't feel like signing?" She leaned forward, placing her manicured hands flat on the table. "Then I'll drag this through court for the next 2 years. I'll tell Judge Halverson about your drinking problem, your anger issues, how you've been neglecting the children. I'll make sure you're lucky to get supervised visits every other weekend." "My drinking problem?" I gestured to my beer. "This is my first one today." "That's not how my lawyer will present it." Her voice was silk over steel. "Face facts, Jack. You're a 40-year-old handyman with a high school education. I'm a successful real estate agent with connections all over this county. Who do you think the judge will believe?" I set down my beer and picked up the envelope, weighing it in my hands. "You know what, Vanessa? You're absolutely right. I'm just a simple guy who fixes people's broken pipes and squeaky doors. What could I possibly know about fighting dirty?" Relief flickered across her face. "Exactly. So we can do this the easy way or the hard way. But either way, it's happening. Your choice." I opened the envelope and pulled out the papers, scanning the legal jargon. My mother's house, the 1890s farmhouse where I'd grown up, where we'd raised our kids, was listed as marital property to be awarded to Vanessa. The carriage house out back, where I ran my handyman business, was included in the deal. "This is generous of you," I said, flipping through the pages, "leaving me the truck and my tools. Though I notice you're claiming the carriage house too. Where exactly am I supposed to run my business from?" "That's your problem to figure out." She checked her gold watch. "I have an early morning appointment, so if you could just sign those tonight, I'd appreciate it." "An early morning appointment?" "Right." I wondered if her new client preferred morning meetings to late-night ones, or if this was just expanding business hours. "Tell me something, Vanessa. This sudden decision to end our marriage, it wouldn't have anything to do with that new fitness instructor at CrossFit Maine, would it? What's his name? Luke something?" Her face flushed, but her voice stayed steady. "I don't know what you're talking about." Luke Merrill, drives that ridiculous white Tesla, wears those tight Under Armour shirts, posts motivational quotes on Instagram every morning at 6 a.m. sharp. I kept my tone conversational. Funny thing, I was replacing the Henderson's kitchen faucet last week, and Mrs. Henderson mentioned seeing your car at his lake house multiple times during business hours. You're paranoid, Jack, and pathetic. But her hands were trembling slightly as she reached for her purse. Luke is a client. I'm helping him find commercial property for a second gym location. At his house? That's some dedicated customer service. Vanessa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Sign the papers, Jack. Don't make this uglier than it has to be. I looked down at the divorce decree, then back up at my wife of 15 years. The woman who'd promised to love me in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, till death do us part. The mother of my children. The person I'd trusted with every secret, every fear, every dream. You know what? You're right. Why make this complicated? I reached for the pen she'd thoughtfully provided. Just one quick question. Where are Emma and Tyler during all this? They're usually up playing video games at this hour. They're at my sister's for the weekend. I thought it would be better if they weren't here for this conversation. How considerate. I clicked the pen and held it over the signature line. And they're okay with Mommy and Daddy getting divorced? They'll adjust. Kids are resilient. I nodded thoughtfully. They are indeed. Amazing what kids can bounce back from these days. I signed my name with a flourish. There. Happy? Vanessa's smile was triumphant as she gathered up the papers. See? That wasn't so hard. I'll file these first thing Monday morning. You can start moving your things out of the master bedroom this weekend. Actually, I think I'll sleep in the carriage house tonight. Give you some privacy. I stood and grabbed my beer. Wouldn't want to cramp your style if you have any more late-night business calls. She was already heading for the door, the papers clutched against her chest like a trophy. Goodbye, Jack. Try not to be too bitter about this. It's better for everyone. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen, finishing my beer and listening to the old house settle around me. The refrigerator hummed. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I wanted. It rang 3 times before a gravelly voice answered. Ray's bar. We're closed. Hey, Uncle Ray, it's Jack. Jack? Jesus, kid, it's past midnight. Everything okay? Ray Bouchard wasn't actually my uncle, but he'd been my father's best friend and had looked out for me since Dad died when I was 12. He owned the only decent bar in town and knew everyone's business before they did. Vanessa just served me divorce papers. Wants the house, the kids, everything. A pause. That cheating woman. I heard rumors, but I was hoping they weren't true. What kind of rumors? The kind that involve her and that muscle-bound pretty boy from the gym. Half the town's seen them together. I'm sorry, Jack. You deserve better. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the carriage house, its windows dark. Ray, remember that favor you owe me for fixing your walk-in cooler? Course I do. What do you need? Information. Everything you can find out about Luke Merrill, where he banks, who he owes money to, what kind of business he's really running, and I need it quiet. You planning something stupid? I smiled in the darkness. Uncle Ray, I'm just a simple handyman. What could I possibly be planning? After I hung up, I walked out to the carriage house and climbed the narrow stairs to my workshop. My tools were arranged on pegboards exactly the way my father had taught me, everything in its place, ready for use. Hammers, screwdrivers, wrenches, saws, the implements of honest work. But tonight, I was thinking about a different kind of tool. I opened my laptop and logged into the joint checking account I shared with Vanessa. She'd been so focused on the house and custody arrangements, she'd forgotten about the liquid assets. With a few keystrokes, I transferred our savings into a new account in my name only. Then I canceled her credit cards and changed the passwords on all our online accounts. If Vanessa wanted to play hardball, she'd just discovered she was facing a pitcher who'd been throwing curves a lot longer than she realized. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the signed divorce papers, then texted it to my sister Marion with a message. "Call me first thing tomorrow. We need to talk." Marion was a paralegal at the county courthouse and had been warning me about Vanessa's behavior for months. She'd know exactly what to do next. As I settled into the old recliner where I did my paperwork, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. Vanessa thought she'd checkmated me with her lawyer and her threats and her perfectly planned ambush. What she didn't realize was that she'd just declared war on a man who'd spent his entire adult life solving other people's problems. And her problem was about to become very, very complicated. My phone rang at 6:30 a.m., jarring me awake in the recliner where I'd fallen asleep. Marion's name flashed on the screen. "Jesus Christ, Jack. Please tell me you didn't actually sign those papers." I rubbed my eyes and stretched, my back protesting after a night in the chair. "Good morning to you too, sis. And yes, I signed them. Had a gun to my head." "You idiot! Never sign anything without having a lawyer review it first. That's rule number 1 of getting divorced." "Relax, Marion. I may be just a high school graduate, but I'm not stupid." I walked to the window and looked across the yard at the Maine house. Vanessa's BMW was gone. Another early morning appointment, no doubt. "Tell me something. How long does it take for divorce papers to be processed once they're filed?" "In Maine, usually 30 to 60 days, depending on the court's schedule." "Why?" "Just curious about the timeline." I headed downstairs to make coffee on the hot plate I kept in the workshop. Hypothetically, if someone discovered new information after signing but before filing, could that change things? Marion's voice sharpened. "What kind of new information?" "The kind that might affect custody arrangements or property division." "Jack, what are you planning?" I spooned instant coffee into a mug and added hot water from the electric kettle. "I'm planning to have breakfast and then fix Mrs. Chen's garbage disposal. After that, maybe I'll swing by the courthouse and have a chat with my favorite paralegal about filing some paperwork of my own." "What kind of paperwork?" "The kind that requests paternity testing for Emma and Tyler." The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Marion spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jack, do you have reason to believe?" "I have reason to believe a lot of things. The question is whether I can prove them." I took a sip of coffee and grimaced. Instant was barely coffee at all, but it was caffeinated and hot. "How much does DNA testing cost these days?" "A few $100s through the court system." "Jack, if you're right about this..." Then Vanessa's been playing a much longer game than I realized, and she's about to discover that I can play games too. After I hung up with Marion, I showered in the small bathroom attached to the carriage house and put on my work clothes: jeans, a flannel shirt, and steel-toed boots. The uniform of an honest working man. The costume of someone nobody ever suspects of being particularly clever. Mrs. Chen lived in a tidy ranch house on Maple Street, and her garbage disposal had been making grinding noises for a week. It was a simple fix, just a bent blade that needed adjusting. But I took my time with it, letting my mind work through the problem of Vanessa. "Mr. Landry," Mrs. Chen said as I packed up my tools, "I hope you don't mind me saying, but you seem troubled today. Is everything all right?" I looked up at her kind, weathered face. Mrs. Chen was 73 years old and had been married to her husband for 52 years. She'd raised 4 children and helped with 11 grandchildren. If anyone understood family problems, it was her. "My wife served me divorce papers last night," I said. "Wants to take the kids and the house." Mrs. Chen clucked her tongue sympathetically. "I'm very sorry to hear that. Divorce is hard on everyone, especially the children. How old are Emma and Tyler now?" "Emma's 13, Tyler's 11. I closed my toolbox with more force than necessary." They're good kids. They don't deserve to be caught in the middle of this mess. No child deserves that. She handed me a check for the repair work. Mr. Landry, may I give you some advice from an old woman who's seen a lot of marriages come and go? I'd appreciate that, Mrs. Chen. The truth has a way of coming out, no matter how deeply people try to bury it. Be patient, be smart, and remember that the best revenge is living well. I thanked her and drove to my next job, but her words stuck with me. The truth has a way of coming out. The question was whether I could help it along. My next stop was the Hendersons' house, where I was installing new kitchen cabinets. Mrs. Henderson was a chatty woman in her 60s who knew everyone in town and loved sharing what she knew. Jack, I heard about you and Vanessa, she said as I measured cabinet doors. I'm so sorry, though between you and me I can't say I'm entirely surprised. I looked up from my tape measure. Oh? Well, I probably shouldn't say anything, but... She glanced around as if someone might be listening. I've seen her car at that young man's house quite a few times, the one with the fancy electric car, during the day when most people are at work. Luke Merrill? That's the one. Very handsome, but there's something about him I don't trust. Too smooth, if you know what I mean. And the way he looks at married women at the grocery store. She shook her head disapprovingly. How many times would you say you've seen Vanessa's car there? Mrs. Henderson considered this seriously. Oh, at least a dozen times over the past few months. Always during the day, never for very long. 45 minutes, maybe an hour. Interesting. I marked measurements on the cabinet door. You wouldn't happen to remember any specific dates, would you? Funny you should ask. I keep a diary, have for 30 years. Just little notes about what happens each day. I could check if you'd like. 20 minutes later, Mrs. Henderson handed me a list of 7 dates when she'd observed Vanessa's BMW in Luke's driveway. I photographed the list with my phone and thanked her profusely. I hope this helps, Jack. Vanessa always seemed like such a nice girl, but people change. Sometimes they show you who they really are. My final stop of the day was Ray's Bar, a dimly lit establishment that served the best burgers in town and minded its own business. Ray was behind the bar, polishing glasses and watching a baseball game on the TV mounted in the corner. You look like a man who needs a beer, he said as I took a stool at the bar. Make it 2. It's been a long day. Ray opened 2 bottles of Budweiser and set one in front of me. I made some calls about your friend Luke Merrill. Turns out he's not as squeaky clean as he pretends to be. I took a long drink and waited. First off, his gym is bleeding money. Turns out motivational Instagram posts don't pay the bills. He's 3 months behind on rent and owes his equipment suppliers about 40 grand. Interesting. What else? He's got a gambling problem. Poker games at the casino, sports betting, even some underground stuff in Portland. Word is he's into some serious people for serious money. I absorbed this information. A man with money problems might be very interested in a woman who was about to inherit a valuable piece of real estate. There's more, Ray continued. My bartender friend at the Hilton says Luke's been bringing the same blonde woman there for lunch dates. Always pays cash, always requests a corner booth where they won't be seen. How many times? At least 6 or 7 over the past 3 months. My friend remembers because the woman always seemed nervous, kept checking her phone like she was worried about being caught. I finished my first beer and started on the second. Ray, I need another favor. Name it. I need you to keep your ears open. If Luke or Vanessa say anything about their plans, about the divorce, about anything at all, I want to know about it. Ray nodded grimly. Consider it done. Jack, I knew your father, and I've watched you grow up. You're good people. If that woman thinks she can steamroll you, she's got another thing coming. I left the bar feeling better than I had in months. Information was power, and I was starting to accumulate quite a bit of both. But I needed more than gossip and circumstantial evidence. I needed proof. That evening, I drove to the electronics store in the next town over and bought a small GPS tracker. the kind nervous parents use to keep tabs on teenage drivers. It was perfectly legal to install it on a vehicle I co-owned, and it would give me real-time information about Vanessa's movements. At home, I waited until after midnight, then slipped outside and attached the tracker to the underside of Vanessa's BMW. It was invisible unless you knew where to look, and it would broadcast her location to an app on my phone. Back in the carriage house, I opened my laptop and began documenting everything I'd learned. Mrs. Henderson's observations, Ray's intelligence about Luke's financial problems, the dates and times of suspicious behavior. I was building a case, piece by piece. My phone buzzed with a text message from Vanessa. "Staying at Brandy's tonight. Don't wait up." Brandy was her assistant at the real estate office, a 20-something blonde who worshipped Vanessa and would lie for her without hesitation. But the GPS tracker would tell me if she was really at Brandy's apartment or somewhere else entirely. I checked the app. Vanessa's car was parked at 47 Lakeshore Drive, Luke Merrill's address. I smiled and made a note in my file. Day 1 of my investigation, and already Vanessa was providing evidence of her deception. At this rate, I'd have enough ammunition to destroy her credibility long before those divorce papers made it to court. The truth was indeed coming out, and I was going to make sure everyone heard it loud and clear. The next morning, I was replacing a broken window at the Miller house when my phone rang. Vanessa's name appeared on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times in 10 minutes before I finally answered. "Good morning, sweetheart. How was your night at Brandy's?" A pause. "Fine. Listen, Jack, I need to talk to you about the joint checking account. My card was declined at the coffee shop this morning." "That's strange. Maybe there's a problem with the bank system." "Don't play games with me. I know you moved the money." I set down my putty knife and stepped away from the window. "Vanessa, we're getting divorced. I thought it would be prudent to separate our finances before things get complicated." "You can't just steal our money." "I didn't steal anything. I moved my money into my account. If you need cash, I suggest you ask your lawyer how spousal support works in Maine." The line went quiet, except for her breathing. When she spoke again, her voice was dangerously calm. "You're making a mistake, Jack. I tried to do this the easy way, but if you want to fight dirty, I can play that game too." "I'm sure you can. You've had plenty of practice lately." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all. I'm just a simple handyman who doesn't understand complicated things like adultery and fraud." She hung up without another word. I smiled and went back to work on the window, but my good mood didn't last long. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Emma. "Dad, Mom says you and her are getting divorced. Is that true?" My heart clenched. Emma was 13, old enough to understand what divorce meant, but young enough to still believe her parents could fix anything if they tried hard enough. "Yes, sweetheart, it's true. But I want you to know that this has nothing to do with you or Tyler. Sometimes grown-ups just can't live together anymore." "But why? Did you have a fight?" I sat down on the Miller's front steps, trying to find words that would be honest without being cruel. "It's complicated, Em. Your mom and I want different things now, and we can't seem to find a way to compromise. Are you still going to be my dad?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Of course I am. Nothing will ever change that. I love you and Tyler more than anything in the world." "Mom says we might have to move to a different house." "I don't want to move, Dad. All my friends are here." "I know, baby. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you and Tyler are taken care of, okay? Don't worry about the grown-up stuff. That's my job." After I hung up, I sat on the steps for a long time, staring at nothing. Emma's voice kept echoing in my head. "Are you still going to be my dad?" What would happen when she found out I might not be her biological father? Would she still want me in her life? Would Tyler? The thought of losing my children was worse than losing the house, worse than losing Vanessa, worse than anything I could imagine. My phone buzzed with a text from Marion. "Meet me at the courthouse at 5 p.m. I have news." I finished the window repair and drove straight to the courthouse, the imposing brick building that had been dispensing justice in our county for over 100 years. Marion was waiting for me on the front steps, her expression grim. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Vanessa filed the divorce papers this morning." That was fast. She said she was going to wait until Monday. She also filed an emergency motion for temporary custody of the children and exclusive use of the marital home. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She can do that? If she can convince the judge that you're a threat to the children or that there's been domestic violence, yes. Jack, she's claiming you've been drinking heavily and making threatening phone calls. That's complete bullshit. I know that, and you know that. But do you have any proof? Witnesses who can testify to your sobriety? Documentation of your interactions with her? I thought about the GPS tracker, the photographs, Mrs. Henderson's diary entries. I might have a few things. Marion studied my face. What aren't you telling me? I've been documenting Vanessa's affair with Luke Merrill. I have witness statements, photographic evidence, financial records showing his money problems. I think she's been planning this divorce for months, maybe longer. Jesus, Jack, why didn't you lead with that? Marion grabbed my arm. Come on. We need to get you a real lawyer, and we need to do it tonight. 3 hours later, I was sitting in the office of Patricia Walsh, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being tougher than a $2 steak. She was a small woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Landry, she said after reviewing my evidence, you've done excellent work documenting your wife's extramarital relationship. However, I have to ask, are you prepared for what comes next? Divorce proceedings can get very ugly, very quickly. She fired the first shot when she threatened to take my kids away from me. About that, you mentioned requesting paternity testing. Do you have specific reasons to doubt your biological relationship to the children? I explained about the timeline of Emma's birth, about Tyler's blood type not matching mine or Vanessa's, about the subtle physical differences I'd noticed but dismissed over the years. Patricia made notes as I spoke. If paternity testing reveals you're not the biological father, it could significantly impact custody arrangements, but it could also mean you'd have no legal rights to the children at all. Are you prepared for that possibility? The question I'd been avoiding finally demanded an answer. Was I prepared to lose Emma and Tyler forever if it meant exposing Vanessa's lies? Those kids are my children in every way that matters, I said finally. I've raised them, loved them, been there for every scraped knee and school play and birthday party. If the DNA says otherwise, I'll fight for them anyway. Patricia smiled for the first time since I'd arrived. Good answer. Now, let's talk about strategy. The next morning, I put on my only suit, a navy blue one I'd worn to my father-in-law's funeral 3 years earlier, and met Patricia at the courthouse. Vanessa was already there with her lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit who probably charged more per hour than I made in a week. Vanessa looked perfect, as always. Her hair was styled, her makeup flawless, her black dress professional, but feminine. She looked like a successful businesswoman and devoted mother. I looked like exactly what I was, a working-class guy who was out of his depth. But appearances could be deceiving. Judge Halverson was a stern woman in her 60s who'd been on the bench for 20 years and had seen every trick in the book. She listened patiently as Vanessa's lawyer painted me as an unstable alcoholic who posed a danger to my children. Your Honor, he said, my client has documented evidence of Mr. Landry's erratic behavior, including threatening phone calls and financial manipulation designed to coerce her into staying in an unhappy marriage. When it was Patricia's turn, she stood and smiled pleasantly. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence that Mrs. Landry has been engaged in an extramarital affair for several months and may have been planning this divorce as part of a scheme to defraud my client of his rightful share of marital assets. The courtroom went silent. Vanessa's face went white, then red. Her lawyer started to object, but Judge Halverson held up a hand. "I'll hear your evidence, Ms. Walsh." For the next hour, Patricia systematically destroyed Vanessa's credibility. She presented Mrs. Henderson's diary entries, photographs of Vanessa's car at Luke's house, financial records showing Luke's gambling debts, and testimony from Ray about the lunch dates at the hotel. But the coup de grace came when Patricia played a recording from my phone. "This is from yesterday morning," she explained. "Mrs. Landry called my client to discuss their joint bank account." Vanessa's voice filled the courtroom. "You can't just steal our money." Then my voice, calm and reasonable. "I didn't steal anything. I moved my money into my account." And finally, the killer. "You're making a mistake, Jack. I tried to do this the easy way, but if you want to fight dirty, I can play that game too." Judge Halverson looked at Vanessa with obvious distaste. "Mrs. Landry, do you care to explain these allegations?" Vanessa's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear, but she shook her head and stood up. "Your Honor, my relationship with Mr. Merrill is purely professional. He's a client, and I've been helping him find commercial real estate." "At his private residence? During lunch dates at hotels?" Judge Halverson's voice was skeptical. It's not what it looks like." "I see." The judge made some notes. "Ms. Walsh, you mentioned requesting paternity testing?" Patricia nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. My client has reason to believe that Mrs. Landry's deception may extend beyond her current extramarital affair." The courtroom erupted. Vanessa's lawyer was on his feet objecting. Vanessa was trying to speak over him, and the gallery was buzzing with whispered conversations. Judge Halverson banged her gavel. "Order! Miss Walsh, that's a very serious allegation." "Yes, Your Honor. We're prepared to present evidence supporting our request for DNA testing of both minor children." I watched Vanessa's face as the words sank in. For just a moment, her perfect composure cracked, and I saw something that looked like panic in her eyes. "Your Honor," her lawyer said desperately, "this is clearly a vindictive attempt to—" "Mr. Morrison, your client just testified under oath that her relationship with Mr. Merrill is purely professional, despite substantial evidence to the contrary. Her credibility is already in question." Judge Halverson looked directly at Vanessa. "Mrs. Landry, do you object to paternity testing?" Vanessa looked like a deer caught in headlights. If she objected, it would look suspicious. If she agreed, she risked exposing whatever secrets she'd been keeping. "No, Your Honor, I don't object." "Very well. I'm ordering expedited DNA testing for both children to be completed within 2 weeks. Until then, I'm denying Mrs. Landry's request for emergency custody and exclusive use of the marital home. Both parties will maintain the current living arrangements, and both children will remain in the family home with Mr. Landry." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that sounded like justice being served. As we filed out of the courtroom, Vanessa grabbed my arm. "Jack, we need to talk. Privately." I looked down at her manicured fingers digging into my suit jacket. "I think we've said everything we need to say, Vanessa. See you at the DNA test." I walked away without looking back, but I could feel her eyes burning into my back. The war was just beginning, and I'd won the first battle. But something told me Vanessa wasn't going to surrender without a fight. The DNA test was scheduled for the following Tuesday at the county health department. I arrived early and sat in the waiting room, watching other families deal with their own crises. A teenage girl getting tested for STDs. An elderly man having blood drawn for diabetes monitoring. A young couple nervously holding hands while waiting for pregnancy test results. Emma and Tyler arrived with Vanessa at exactly 9 a.m. The kids looked confused and scared, unsure why they needed to give blood samples for their parents' divorce. Vanessa looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Dad?" Tyler approached me hesitantly. At 11, he was all knees and elbows, still young enough to hold his father's hand in public. "Mom says we have to do a test." "What kind of test?" I knelt down to his level, trying to find words that wouldn't terrify him. It's just a simple blood test, buddy. Like when you go to the doctor for your checkup. It won't hurt much and it'll be over really quick. But why do we need it? Over his head, I could see Vanessa watching us, her face pale and drawn. Sometimes in divorces, the court needs to make sure of certain things. It's just paperwork stuff, nothing for you to worry about. Emma was old enough to sense that something bigger was happening. She sat next to me without speaking, her 13-year-old mind probably working through possibilities I hoped she'd never have to consider. The actual testing took less than 10 minutes. A cheerful nurse drew small vials of blood from each of us, labeled them carefully, and sent them off to the lab. Results would be available in 5 to 7 business days. That wasn't so bad, was it? The nurse said to Tyler as she applied a bandage to his arm. Can we get ice cream now? He asked. Mom promised ice cream if we were brave. I looked at Vanessa, who nodded reluctantly. Sure, buddy, but I need to talk to your mom for a minute first. We stepped outside while the kids waited in the lobby. Vanessa immediately went on the attack. I hope you're happy, Jack. You're traumatizing our children with this insanity. Our children? That's interesting phrasing, considering what we're testing for. She flinched. Those kids love you. They think you're their father. What happens to them when they find out you've been living a lie? I haven't been living a lie, Vanessa. You have. I kept my voice low, conscious of the kids inside. If those test results show what I think they're going to show, Emma and Tyler are going to learn that their mother is a liar and a cheat. That's on you, not me. Jack, please. We can work this out. Call off the divorce and I'll end things with Luke. We can go to counseling, start over. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. It's too late for that, Vanessa. You made your choice when you decided to destroy our family. Now you get to live with the consequences. That afternoon, I was installing a new toilet at the Parkers' house when my phone rang. Ray's name appeared on the screen. Jack, you need to get down to the bar, now. I'm working, Ray. What's going on? Luke Merrill is here and he's drunk off his ass. He's been running his mouth about you and Vanessa for the past hour. Half the town is listening. I packed up my tools and drove to Ray's bar as fast as the speed limit would allow. The parking lot was fuller than usual for a Tuesday afternoon, and I could hear raised voices before I even opened the door. Luke was standing at the bar, swaying slightly, his usually perfect hair disheveled and his designer shirt wrinkled. He was holding a beer in one hand and gesturing wildly with the other. Think he's so smart, Luke was saying to anyone who would listen. Jack Landry, the great handyman. Well, let me tell you something about your precious Jack. The bar went quiet when I walked in. Every head turned toward me, and I could feel the weight of their attention. Luke noticed the sudden silence and turned around, his bleary eyes focusing on me with difficulty. Well, if it isn't the cuckold himself. Luke raised his beer in a mock toast. Come to join the party, Jack. We're just discussing your lovely wife. I walked slowly to the bar, keeping my hands visible and my expression neutral. Ray caught my eye and shook his head slightly, a warning to stay calm. Luke, I said conversationally, you look like you've had a few. Maybe it's time to call it a day. Oh, I've had more than a few. I'm celebrating, you see. Celebrating the fact that I've been screwing your wife for 6 months and you were too stupid to notice. A collective intake of breath from the crowd. Someone in the back whispered, "Holy shit." I felt my hands clench into fists, but I forced them to relax. That's between you and Vanessa. I'm not interested in fighting about it. Luke laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. Fighting? Why would we fight? You should be thanking me. I've been taking care of your wife's needs while you were out playing with your little tools. Luke, you're drunk. You should go home. Home? He gestured wildly, sloshing beer onto the floor. Which home would that be? The one I can't afford because your wife promised to help me buy commercial property and then disappeared when things got complicated. This was news to me. What are you talking about? She promised me she'd have access to cash after the divorce, said she was going to get the house and could use it as collateral for a business loan. We were going to be partners, her and me. Luke's voice was getting louder and more slurred. But now she won't return my calls. Now she's acting like she barely knows me. The pieces were falling into place. Vanessa hadn't just been cheating, she'd been planning to use my mother's house to finance Luke's failing business. The affair wasn't about love or passion. It was about money. Sounds like she played you, I said mildly. Played me? Luke's face flushed red. I'll show you who got played. Those kids of yours? Emma and Tyler? Want to guess who their real daddy is? The bar went silent. Even the jukebox seemed to stop playing. I felt something cold and dangerous unfurl in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. You're drunk, Luke. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. Vanessa told me all about it. How she got pregnant with Emma right after we first hooked up 14 years ago. How she convinced you the baby was yours because you wanted kids so badly. And then Tyler... He laughed again. Poor stupid Jack, raising another man's children and never having a clue. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. I could feel everyone in the bar watching me, waiting to see how I'd react. Some of them looked sympathetic. Others just looked curious, like they were watching a car accident. I walked closer to Luke, stopping just outside arm's reach. When I spoke, my voice was quiet enough that people had to strain to hear it. Luke, you just made a very serious accusation in front of about 30 witnesses. I hope for your sake that you can prove it, because if you're lying, you just opened yourself up to a slander lawsuit that'll cost you everything you have left. Some of the drunken confidence faded from his eyes. I'm not lying. We'll see. The DNA test results should be back by Friday. If you're right, then I guess Vanessa owes you child support for the past 14 years. If you're wrong... I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Well, let's just say you better hope you're right. I turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at him. Oh, and Luke, if I were you, I'd be very careful about what I said in public from now on. Small towns have long memories, and people don't like men who brag about destroying families. I walked out of the bar without looking back, but I could hear the buzz of conversation starting up behind me. By evening, everyone in town would know what Luke had said. By tomorrow, it would be all over social media. Vanessa's carefully constructed image was crumbling, and she had no one to blame but herself. That night, I sat in the carriage house and called Marion to update her on the day's events. Jesus, Jack, he really said all that in front of witnesses? Every word. Ray's got it on the security camera too, in case we need it for court. This is good for you legally, but it's going to be hell on the kids when they find out. I stared out the window at the Maine house, where Emma and Tyler were probably doing homework or playing video games, blissfully unaware that their world was about to implode. I know, but they were going to find out anyway when the test results come back. At least this way they'll hear it from me instead of reading it on Facebook. What are you going to tell them? The truth. That I love them no matter what some test says. That I'll always be their dad, regardless of biology. I paused. And that their mother made some very bad choices that hurt a lot of people. Friday couldn't come fast enough. The DNA test results arrived on Thursday, a day earlier than expected. Patricia Walsh called me at 7 a.m., her voice carefully neutral. Jack, I have the results. Can you come to my office this morning? Just tell me over the phone. A pause. You're not the biological father of either child. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, even though I'd been expecting this news. Hearing it confirmed was still like taking a punch to the gut. Jack? Are you there? I'm here. What happens now? We need to discuss your options. This changes the legal landscape significantly. but it doesn't have to change your relationship with Emma and Tyler if you don't want it to. An hour later, I was sitting across from Patricia in her office, staring at the official lab report. The numbers were clinical and precise, 0% probability of paternity for both children. The good news is that Luke was lying about being their father, Patricia said. The DNA samples I had tested show he's not related to either child. So who is? That's not something we can determine from these tests. But frankly, it doesn't matter for our purposes. What matters is that Vanessa committed paternity fraud, and we can use that to destroy her credibility in court. I thought about Emma, asking if I was still going to be her dad, about Tyler wanting ice cream after his blood test, about 14 years of bedtime stories, soccer games, school plays, and scraped knees. I want to adopt them, I said suddenly, legally, so no one can ever take them away from me. Patricia smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. We can file the paperwork immediately. Given Vanessa's deception and Luke's public statements, I don't think we'll have much opposition. What about Vanessa? What happens to her? That depends on how vindictive you want to be. We could pursue criminal charges for fraud. We could sue for damages, the cost of raising children who weren't biologically yours, emotional distress, legal fees. We could destroy her professionally and personally. I considered this. A month ago, I would have said I could never be that cruel to the mother of my children. But a month ago, I hadn't known the depth of her betrayal. Let's start with the adoption paperwork. We can discuss the rest later. That evening, I sat Emma and Tyler down in the living room for the hardest conversation of my life. They sensed something serious was happening. Kids always do. And they were unusually quiet. I need to tell you both something important, I began. The blood test we took last week, it showed that I'm not your biological father. Emma's face went white. Tyler looked confused. What does that mean? Tyler asked. It means that genetically we're not related, but that doesn't change anything about how I feel about you. You're still my children, and I'm still your dad. That will never change. Emma found her voice. So who is our real father? I don't know, sweetheart. But it doesn't matter. Family isn't just about DNA, it's about love and commitment and being there for each other. I've been your dad since the day you were born, and I always will be. Tyler climbed into my lap, something he hadn't done in over a year. Are you going to leave us? Never. In fact, I'm going to legally adopt both of you so that no one can ever separate us. Would you like that? Both kids nodded, Emma wiping tears from her eyes. What about Mom? She asked. Does she know? Yes, she knows. And we're going to have to talk about some difficult things regarding your mother's choices. But that's between the grown-ups. Your job is just to be kids. The next morning, I drove to Vanessa's real estate office. She was showing a house to clients, according to Brandy, but I decided to wait. I had time. The office was typical small-town real estate. Motivational posters about home sweet home and living the dream, a wall of photos showing happy families in front of houses they'd bought, a coffee station with stale donuts. Brandy kept glancing at me nervously. She was a pretty girl in her mid-20s, blonde and bubbly, the kind of person who believed everything she was told and repeated it without thinking. Mr. Landry, she said finally, I heard about what happened at Ray's bar. I'm really sorry. Which part are you sorry about, Brandy? The part where Luke announced he'd been sleeping with my wife, or the part where he claimed to be the father of my children? She flushed red. I didn't know about any of that. Vanessa never told me. But you knew she was having an affair. It wasn't a question, and Brandy's expression confirmed it. She made me promise not to say anything. She said it was complicated. I'm sure it was. I sat down in one of the client chairs. Tell me something, Brandy. Did Vanessa ever mention using my house as collateral for a business loan? Brandy's eyes went wide. How did you... I don't know what you're talking about. She did, didn't she? She was planning to take my mother's house and use it to finance Luke's gym expansion. That's why she wanted the divorce to go through quickly, before I could figure out what she was really after. Mr. Landry, I shouldn't. The front door opened, and Vanessa walked in with a middle-aged couple who were clearly her clients. She saw me sitting there and froze. Jack, what are you doing here? I stood up slowly. We need to talk, Vanessa. Privately. She turned to her clients with a bright, professional smile. I'm so sorry, but I need to handle a family emergency. Brandy will get you some coffee, and I'll be right back. She led me into her private office and closed the door. The space was decorated to project success, expensive furniture, awards on the walls, photos of luxury properties she'd sold. If you're here to gloat about the DNA results, you can save your breath, she said, sitting behind her desk like it was a fortress. Actually, I'm here to discuss terms. Terms? For your surrender. I sat down across from her. Because that's what this is, Vanessa. You've lost. The question is how much damage you want to absorb in the process. She tried to look defiant, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Let me spell it out for you. You committed paternity fraud for 14 years. You planned to steal my inheritance to finance your boyfriend's failing business. You lied under oath in family court, and thanks to Luke's drunken confession, half the town knows about it. You can't prove any of that. I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Luke's slurred voice filled the small office. Those kids of yours, Emma and Tyler, want to guess who their real daddy is? Vanessa's face went ashen. Where did you get that? Ray's security camera. Amazing what people will say when they think no one's recording. I put the phone away. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to agree to my adoption of Emma and Tyler. You're going to waive any claim to spousal support or property division. And you're going to quietly disappear from their lives until they're old enough to decide if they want a relationship with you. You can't take my children away from me. They were never your children to begin with, were they? You used them as pawns in whatever game you were playing. Emma's 13 years old, Vanessa. She's going to figure out the timeline eventually. She's going to realize you cheated on me and lied about her paternity from day one. Vanessa was crying now, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. Jack, please. I made mistakes, but I love those kids. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you loved Luke's promises about business partnerships and financial security. The kids were just leverage to get what you really wanted. I stood to leave, then turned back. You have 24 hours to decide. Agree to my terms, and this stays between us and the lawyers. Refuse, and I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of person you really are. And if I agree, what happens to me? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, still perfectly put together despite the tears. But all I could see now was the stranger who had been living in my house, sleeping in my bed, lying to my face for years. That's not my problem anymore, Vanessa. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. I walked out of her office, past Brandy's shocked face, past the photos of happy families and motivational posters about dreams coming true. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The war was over. I had won. But the real victory wasn't the house or the money or even the satisfaction of exposing Vanessa's lies. The real victory was waiting for me at home. 2 kids who still called me dad, who still needed help with homework and wanted bedtime stories and believed I could fix anything that was broken. Some things, it turned out, were worth fighting for, and some people were worth destroying to protect them. 3 weeks later, I threw a party. It wasn't planned as a celebration, exactly. Emma had made the honor roll, Tyler had scored his first goal in soccer, and I figured they deserved recognition for handling the divorce with more grace than most adults could manage. But as I sent out invitations to neighbors, friends, and family, I realized it had become something more. It was a declaration, a statement that the Landry family was still standing, still strong, still worth celebrating. The party was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at the farmhouse. I spent the morning setting up tables in the backyard, stringing lights between the old oak trees, and preparing enough food to feed half the county. Uncle Ray brought beer and his famous barbecue sauce. Marion made her legendary potato salad. Mrs. Chen contributed homemade apple pie. By 2 o'clock, the yard was full of people. Neighbors I'd done work for over the years, Emma's friends from school, Tyler's soccer teammates, courthouse employees who knew Marion, regulars from Ray's bar. Even Deputy Annie showed up in civilian clothes, bringing her kids to play with mine. It felt like the whole town had turned out to show their support, and maybe they had. Small towns rally around their own when times get tough, and I'd been part of this community my entire life. I was manning the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs, when I saw the white Tesla pull into my driveway. The conversation around me gradually died down as people noticed the car. Luke got out first, wearing sunglasses and a tight t-shirt that showed off his gym-sculpted physique. He looked around at the crowd with obvious disdain. Vanessa emerged from the passenger side, dressed in a flowing sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd clearly been drinking. Her movements were careful and deliberate in the way that screamed, trying not to look drunk. Brandy climbed out of the back seat, looking uncomfortable and out of place. I was surprised to see her there, but then I realized she was probably the only friend Vanessa had left. The three of them approached the crowd like they were walking into enemy territory, which I supposed they were. "Jack!" Vanessa called out, her voice artificially bright. "What a lovely party. I hope you don't mind us stopping by. We were just driving past and saw all the cars." Every eye in the yard was on us now. Conversations had stopped entirely. Even the kids seemed to sense that something significant was happening. I set down my spatula and walked over to meet them, keeping my expression neutral. "Vanessa, Luke, Brandy, this is unexpected." "We were hoping to talk to Emma and Tyler," Vanessa said. "I haven't seen them in weeks. They're here somewhere. I'm sure they'll be happy to see you." I didn't mention that Emma had specifically asked if her mother was coming to the party and had looked relieved when I said no. Luke stepped forward, trying to project confidence despite the hostile stares from the crowd. "Nice little gathering you've got here, Jack. Very quaint." "Thanks. We like to keep things simple." I gestured to the crowd. "Most of these folks have known me since I was Tyler's age. They're good people. Honest people." The implication hung in the air like smoke from the grill. Uncle Ray materialized at my elbow, a beer in each hand. "Jack, you need anything? More propane for the grill? Someone to take out the trash?" His meaning was clear, and Luke's face flushed red. "Are you threatening me, old man?" "Just offering to help with cleanup," Ray said mildly. "Amazing how much garbage can accumulate at a party like this." Vanessa tried to diffuse the tension. "We're not here to cause trouble. I just wanted to see my children." "Your children?" The voice came from behind me. I turned to see Emma approaching, her 13-year-old face set in an expression of cold fury that reminded me painfully of her mother. "Is that what you're calling us now?" "Emma, sweetheart, don't." Emma held up a hand. "Just don't. Do you know what it's like at school now? Do you know what kids are saying about our family?" Vanessa's composure began to crack. "I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen. You cheated on Dad. You lied about who our real father is. You tried to steal our house." Emma's voice was getting louder, drawing even more attention. "And now you show up at our party like nothing happened?" Tyler appeared beside his sister, his young face confused but loyal. At 11, he didn't fully understand all the adult complications, but he knew his family had been hurt. "Mom," he said quietly, "why did you leave us?" The question hit Vanessa like a physical blow. She knelt down to Tyler's level, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't leave you, baby. I would never leave you." But you did, Emma said coldly. You left us the night you decided to cheat. You left us when you lied about Dad being our father. You left us when you chose him over our family. She pointed at Luke, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable as the crowd's hostility became more obvious. Emma, that's enough, I said gently. I didn't want my daughter carrying this kind of anger no matter how justified it might be. No, Dad, it's not enough. Emma turned back to her mother. You want to know the truth? We don't need you anymore. Dad's adopting us legally. We're going to be Landry's forever, and there's nothing you can do about it. Vanessa stood up slowly, her face devastated. Emma, please. I made mistakes, but I love you and Tyler more than anything. If you loved us, you wouldn't have destroyed our family. The crowd was silent now, watching this family drama play out like a soap opera. I could see phones being held up, recording everything for social media posterity. Luke, apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, started backing toward the Tesla. Maybe we should go, Vanessa. This isn't the right time. No, Vanessa said, her voice desperate. I'm not leaving without talking to my children. They're not your children anymore, Emma said with devastating finality. You gave up that right when you chose to be a liar and a cheat. That's when Vanessa snapped. She lunged forward, reaching for Emma, but I stepped between them. Vanessa collided with me instead, her momentum carrying us both toward the picnic table. I sidestepped at the last second, and Vanessa crashed into the table, sending potato salad and coleslaw flying. She went down hard, her sundress riding up, her dignity disappearing along with her balance. The crowd gasped. Someone laughed. Camera phones captured every second of her humiliation. As Vanessa struggled to get up, covered in Marion's famous potato salad, Luke's Tesla alarm started blaring in the driveway. Everyone turned to look at the car, which was now decorated with what appeared to be several bags worth of fresh manure applied liberally to the windshield, hood, and roof. Oops, said a voice from the crowd. Looks like someone had an accident. I couldn't see who had spoken, but I had my suspicions. Ray was grinning broadly, and Deputy Annie was studying her fingernails with unusual interest. Luke ran toward his car, screaming obscenities that made several parents cover their children's ears. The alarm kept wailing, adding a soundtrack of chaos to the scene. Vanessa finally managed to stand up, potato salad dripping from her hair and dress. She looked around at the crowd of faces, some sympathetic, some disgusted, most just curious about what would happen next. You're all going to regret this, she said, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. Every single one of you. The only thing we regret, Uncle Ray called out, is that it took Jack so long to take out the trash. The crowd murmured approval. Someone started clapping, and soon the entire yard erupted in applause. Vanessa looked at me one last time, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and something that might have been regret. This isn't over, Jack. Yes, it is, I replied calmly. It's been over for a long time. You're just finally accepting it. She turned and stalked toward the Tesla, where Luke was frantically trying to scrape manure off the windshield with his bare hands. Brandy followed reluctantly, looking like she wished she was anywhere else in the world. As they drove away, slowly since Luke couldn't see through the manure-covered windshield, the crowd burst into cheers and laughter. Well, Marion said, appearing at my side with a fresh beer, that was entertaining. Dad? Tyler tugged on my shirt. Are they coming back? I knelt down and pulled both my kids into a hug. No, buddy. They're not coming back. It's just us now, and that's exactly how it should be. Emma wiped her eyes and managed a small smile. Can we have cake now? I think we've earned it. As the party resumed around us, I looked out at the crowd of people who had stood by my family when things got tough. Neighbors who had offered support without being asked. Friends who had shown up just to prove they cared. A community that had rallied around us when we needed it most. For the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. The war was over, and we had won more than just a legal victory. We had won our lives back. I raised my beer in a toast to the crowd. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for reminding me what family really means. And thank you for proving that sometimes the good guys really do win. The cheer that went up could probably be heard 3 counties over. Later that night, after the last guest had gone home and the kids were asleep, I sat on the front porch of my mother's house, my house now, and looked up at the stars. The adoption papers were signed and filed. The divorce was final. Vanessa had agreed to all my terms rather than face criminal fraud charges. Emma and Tyler were legally mine forever. The house was safe. My business was thriving thanks to all the referrals from satisfied customers who had witnessed Vanessa's public meltdown. Justice, it turned out, tasted even sweeter than revenge. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You haven't seen the last of me." I deleted it without responding. Some people never learned when they were beaten, but I had learned something important over the past few months. I had learned that I was stronger than I thought, smarter than people assumed, and more ruthless than anyone had imagined when my family was threatened. I had also learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, surrounded by people who love you for exactly who you are. I finished my beer, locked up the house, and went to bed in the master bedroom that was finally, truly mine. Tomorrow, I had a kitchen to remodel for the Johnsons, a leaky roof to fix for the Martins, and a soccer game to attend for Tyler. Life was good. Life was simple. Life was exactly what I had fought so hard to protect. And if Vanessa or Luke or anyone else wanted to challenge that, they were welcome to try. I'd be ready for them.